Okay, everybody, I want to welcome you to the part 2 of the startup series that Fluid is doing with the TVC up at the University of Utah. This is part 2, concept to product. So we'll go ahead and get started. If any of you guys can't hear, if you have any technical difficulties, please feel free to send to myself, the moderator, through your chat. Before we get started, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Dustin Cederholm. I'll be today's moderator. I am the Digital Marketing Director for Fluid Advertising. Today also, or normally on this series with us, we have Phil Case, who was unable to attend today, so we apologize for his absence. But we have the real stars of this event and webinar, and that's Taylor Bench and Spencer Walker of the Technology and Venture Commercialization up here at the University of Utah. Taylor, do you mind taking a short minute to introduce yourself?
Not at all. Thanks, Dustin. Appreciate everybody logging in. My name is Taylor Bench, and I'm the director of the Economic Development team here at the University of Utah. Our team focuses our efforts on working with the market and groups outside of the university, such as investors, subject matter experts, and entrepreneurs. And we basically bridge the gap between the university professors and inventors and the market.
Thank you. Spencer?
Hey, Dustin. Spencer Walker. I work here at TVC along with Taylor, and in addition to being a member of the Economic Development team, I manage the Software Development Center, and the center is tasked with helping to take research-grade software and trying to see if we can create a product that we can put out into the market.
Fantastic. Thank you guys for joining us, and thank you all for joining us on the other side of this webinar. We're really excited to present. As always, you can follow us at hashtag Fluid Webinar Series on Twitter. You can also follow our direct hashtags at GetFluid and at TechComOff. We will be live tweeting throughout this. If you have any questions, you can respond to those as well. So guys, as we just jump right into this, talking part 2, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Spencer, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so a question we asked right off the bat last time was, what do we hope that you can get from this? What can you do tomorrow? And to get started, if you have questions, if you're listening to this webinar, if you have questions or if there's something you want to get out of this this particular webinar, just send it over to us. Message that to Dustin, because we want to make sure that we provide something that's valuable. We also want to give a plug here for our the engine, what we call the engine here at TVC, and that's the process that we use to gather information via an invention disclosure form from faculty and staff at the university, and the process that we take that through to vet the idea, to understand the market potential. And we also have some funding that we have in TVC to help any of those technologies hit certain milestones. We are always looking for new inventors. We're looking for subject matter experts, entrepreneurs, and investors that can help us to vet these technologies. And when we send out these slides afterwards, we'll send a link to the engine engagement forum, and we'd love to have anyone participate with us in that.
As a recap from what we did last time, we talked about the lean startup model, and you can see that webinar and this whole series at the links that you used to come to this webinar, and we'll also send it out in the next email recap. This webinar today is on part 2 of this 4-part series, and we'll be talking about going from concept to product. So basically an invention, a new idea, and what it takes to put that into a product, and the process that we use to go from concept to product.
Go ahead. Excuse me, I was going to say, and prior to that, the first model was just the lean startup. So if you did miss it, that's on our website. And again, like you said, the links will be provided. But you can go back and rewatch any of these, and the full recordings are going to be sent out in addition to the this live version?
So to get started, we at TBC are kind of evangelizers of a few resources. And last time we talked a little bit about the business model canvas. And you know, if you look at really anything that Steve Blank is putting together, and through his trying to think of his website, if you just Google Steve Blank and look at what he's put together. Also, there's a book that Taylor and I like to reference, and it's Talking to Humans. We'll get a little bit into that later. And then some local thought leaders. Taylor, can you talk about a couple of the local guys?
Yeah, so Steve Blank and Alexander Osterwalder have put together some of the books that you see on the screen right now. Nathan Furr and Paul Ahlstrom are also thought leaders in this area in the lean startup model, and they're from here in Utah. They have worked on Nail It, Scale It, a book that they've written, as well as the Big Idea Canvas. And we at the TBC like to just gather these kind of best practices in the commercialization world and aggregate them into our process here at TBC. That process is mentioned, as Spencer mentioned, the commercialization engine. And that's basically our framework, which is a documentation-driven process that is based on customer discovery and validation. If you'd like more training, there's also a course that we suggest on udacity.com, building a startup. But our documentation-driven process is where we really spend a lot of our time here at TBC. And that goes back to what Spencer was talking about in terms of our first interaction with inventors or new ideas is an invention disclosure form. And that's our initial kickoff when an inventor has an idea that could be protected via patent, trademark, or copyright, and that's how our office begins this commercialization process.
So let's take a look at one of those first resources, as was mentioned, the business model canvas. And the canvas is roughly split. We talk about the right side and the left side of the canvas. Today, our focus would be on the right side, and specifically value proposition and customer segments. And any new invention disclosure that we see come into the office, that's one of the first thing that we look for is, in addition to understanding the technology, it's who's going to use it, who will benefit from that, and how.
I would say that that's one resource or one area where Fluid does some great work in terms of talking about the customer and the persona, the customer segment and the persona. Dustin, can you maybe touch a little bit on how you look at that area, the customer segment area?
Absolutely, and so a lot of it is done through market research that is available throughout the web or different books that have been written, obviously going direct to customers, and we'll talk about focus groups in a little bit and how you get into that. And then working with the client themselves, you obviously have some concept of who you think your customer segment is going to be, and so we start with what is your concept of it, and then we drive down into actually discussions with the customers and doing focus groups to get the true understanding of what the customer segments, because so often, as we'll discuss in kind of one of the case studies later on, people, you have an idea, but when it goes to market and you actually start to get sales or inquiries, you will see that it looks a lot different than what you originally proposed. And so how do you really get to the true customer segment that you're going after? And we'll discuss how to do that as well.
It's interesting. You mentioned market research. We have a team of analysts here in the office, and really the first pass for us is just Google searches. I mean, can we come up with a list of 10 keywords from this invention disclosure, and let's just see what else is out there. And sometimes we find that there's already someone building exactly what we thought we were going to be building.
Absolutely, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with just going to patent sites and looking up that as one of the first ideas, and often even if the patent exists, it can be being sat on or being sold to another person who's actually not developing it. So you can either purchase that patent from them or have them do a transfer so that you can still pursue your product. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't continue down the path that you want with your product.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And this slide that you're seeing right now is kind of a magnification of the right side of the canvas, where you've got your value proposition on the left, that's the little present, and your customer segment on the right, that's the smiley guy in the middle of the circle. And the boxes around him, or the shapes around these two elements, help us understand how to deconstruct the pain that the customer is having, or the gain that they're looking for, and the job that they're trying to do, and then taking the value proposition and saying, okay, is this a Band-Aid or a vitamin? Is it something that the customer right now is bleeding and they need a solution immediately, or is it a vitamin that will help them long term? And then you have to think about how you match those two things up. So the pains and your pain reliever being your customer pain, and your product solution is the pain reliever. That matching that Dustin was talking about, that we do through customer interviews, focus groups, whatever method that we design a test around, getting that match is called it's what we call problem solution fit. That's kind of what the nomenclature in the lean startup model is.
And when you say that, I mean, sometimes it's hard to find that fit. And if you can't find it, it's not necessarily that it's a bad idea. Maybe we just need to think about it a little harder and maybe look at it differently. And that's where I think the customer feedback, or a feedback loop, is really important.
Well, I love that analogy, to be honest. We often talk about problems or pain points for people when we discuss the type of copy that should go on a website, or the type of ads that should go out. And we will get, again, later into this, but the features versus benefits, and how everybody really goes about their features and not their benefits. But really, if you understand a problem solution fit, then you're going to be able to explain the benefits of your product more than the actual features. And maybe the features is where you kind of start to struggle with, do I really have a problem solution fit, if you're too focused on that type of that part of the conversation. And so I love the analogy, and I think everybody should think about, is it a vitamin or is it pain pill?
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, you mentioned that struggle, and if this next graphic, I think, really shows that. The left side of this validation, or the resolution to that struggle, it's a mess. I mean, it's just a scribble of guesses and hypotheses and validation work. It's really hard to do, and it takes time and a lot of effort. And so in the process here at TVC, our methodology is based on something similar to the scientific method of creating a hypothesis and creating a test around that hypothesis to see if it is true or not. And so that design, test, iterative cycle is really important to get the fine line of the market signal and what the customers actually want, moving toward the right in this graphic, where you can really start executing on your idea. And that design test is where the TVC commercialization engine, that's its sweet spot. That's what we do quite a bit here in the office.
And for those of you who have been on the previous one, we've shown this slide previously, so I think understanding the importance and value of this really is critical.
So just kind of another play on what we just saw. This might be a little more easy to explain, but this idea that it's just this iterative process. And today we're just focused on the left side of this graphic. We're just searching at this point. Unless we know who the customer is and what pain we're solving, there's really no point in even building out a lot of features or building a company at all. And at TVC, we've kind of laid on top of this what a few of the things that we can do and resources that we can leverage. So we've talked about problem solution fit, which we've abbreviated there. We have a couple of internal programs, one that we call our lean cohort. Again, it's teaching these methods and sending an inventor and a team out to talk to the market. And then today we'll talk a little bit about feasibility and scoping. And if we think we know what the problem is and who the customer is, can we even build it? Can we deliver a solution? You know, you think about there are a lot of problems out there that need to be solved, but for some of those, technology is just not there yet. So let's talk about a case study for a minute.
So this graphic that you're looking at, this will set the stage for the story that we're going to tell. Down at the bottom are different kind of stepping points that you go through when you're getting to a product, going from concept to product. Anything before the point where you are having conversations with inventors, that's the second kind of section there. We're just considering that a fantasy. It's fun to think about, but it's not much more than that. So until you start really having those hard conversations with customers, we've found that there's not a real large value inflection point, and the truth curve there, you're at a very low level of truth and understanding as to what your product is and what the market wants. And so we're going to talk about the first few steps here, post-fantasy, in this case study. So going from conversation to a test and then a prototype.
And bringing it back there, Taylor, what are some of the things you guys have seen that are fantasy? I feel like a lot of us exist in that area. And what is it, is there a trigger that is from fantasy into the conversation, or any commonalities that you've seen for people? Because I know I have a ton of ideas and none of them really have ever come to fruition. But do you see any common things from those two steps?
The steps going from fantasy to conversation?
Yeah, to know if I really have an idea, you know.
I think, just to jump in here, we, rather than naming some specific technology that we've seen, but I think this idea, a lot of us are ideators. You know, we have ideas, we see a need, or there's something that is a problem in our own lives, and Taylor and I have talked about this before. Sometimes you can get trapped in this thing we call monkey brain, where it's, you know, just one idea to the next idea. At some point, you have to actually take one, or have a way to prioritize your ideas, and take that first one, and like we said before, maybe just create a list of 10 keywords, and just do a quick Google search, and just see what else is out there. If it looks like a pretty clean space, I mean, if you've only got a couple thousand results versus 40 million results of some combination of words, maybe it's worth taking a closer look at it.
I'd say that fantasy is oftentimes, it's because we consider it fantasy because it is done on an individual basis. We have our own problem, and we're doing a lot of what some people call me marketing, where they will say, oh, this is my problem and I want to solve it, so I'll extrapolate that out to the market and everybody wants this. And what we find is, in our process, we have to define that customer segment on the right side of the canvas really well to say, who are the stakeholders? I mean, for example, a medical device, the stakeholders are not just the doctor using it or the patient getting the benefit from it, but also the department at the hospital who has to purchase it, the CFO at the hospital who has to manage whether or not the costs incurred are beneficial, and then also what benefit does that have to the patient. There's someone at the hospital who deals with that, and each one of them has their own opinion and decision-making ability as to say, yes, we should purchase this medical device or not. And so until you start talking with all of those people, it's just a really good idea.
That's two great insights.
So this case study that we want to dive into, the team, Mike Cottle, Dr. Mike Cottle, he's a faculty here at the U in the College of Music. Very bright guy. And a student of his that we'll call the entrepreneurial lead, Shane Osterloh. What Mike came up with, Mike's a tinkerer. He calls himself that. He also calls himself a mad scientist. But Mike had a pain, and that was he's also a sound engineer. And so anytime that someone needs something recorded, Mike has to show up, check the mic levels, make sure everything's turned on correctly, and then he sits there in a booth during this performance in the College of Music. And there's a couple of problems with that. And those are, you know, what if you're a student and you show up to practice and you get to the end of it and you go, holy cow, that was the best practice session I've ever had, but it's lost, right? Because there was no mic, there was no mic and there was no mic. There was no mic turned on and there was no mic caudal there. So in order to kind of alleviate that problem, Dr. Caudle came up with this solution. He kind of hodgepodged it together where he used some kind of off-the-shelf technology. He found a couple of software solutions, and then he put those together so that he could have an automated recording software. And so now he doesn't have to be there physically. He just checks the mic level sometimes from home, and as soon as the mic picks up sound, it starts recording. And after 4 minutes of silence, it turns off and it automatically archives. Anyway, there's a lot of features that he built into this. And I met Mike a little less than a year ago, and we talked about what he had created. It's being used here at the U, but it's not being used outside the U. And so we talked about, you know, is there a market for this? You know, you have a little bit more of you have a product in the sense of you're using it, but nobody's buying it outside of the university. And so we brought Mike. This was the first time he had ever worked with TVC, didn't even know anything about TVC. And so it was a good experience for him. We brought him in and put him through our process internally of doing problem solution fit. We, you know, he filled out the invention disclosure, which helped us understand, you know, the technology. And then we had our analysts, you know, chew into it and look and see what is out there that exists. And we really found what we think is a great opportunity. And so we used a little bit of our internal funding and just to see if we did a feasibility study, is essentially what we did. And I think for like $5,000, we were able to understand, do we have something here that we need to completely rebuild? Can we get licenses to the software that he was already using, or is it going to just be too expensive and you know, the value proposition is just not going to be there from the university's perspective?
So this was the work that we talked about, identifying the pain in the market, making sure our solution solves that pain, and the feasibility study that Spencer led is what allows us to say, yes, this is possible. You know, it's not going to be too expensive. We've had the conversations with the market. It's no longer a fantasy. They've been feeding back to us. The market has. We have a pulse on that. And they've actually given us their specs as to what they would want in a particular product set that they would purchase. And so all of that work that we did in conjunction with the inventor, Mike and Shanna, the entrepreneurial lead, we're still going through that process, but we're at a point now where we're saying, okay, this is a thumbs up. It's made it through a go, no-go decision point, and we're ready to allocate some more resources and time on it to develop a product that we know that the market wants right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, at this point, what we'll do is, kind of as the next step, concept to product, based on the feedback we got from the feasibility study, we will come back, pitch to our engine committee, and likely pitch for a full scoping document, which the idea is that would get us to, I mean, I would say right now we already have the alpha product, borderline alpha beta, and but be able to build something that we can send out to some pilot customers and have them play with it.
So we're spending a lot of time, this is the time that we're spending in those first two circles on the left, is making sure that the customer is there and understanding who they are and validating that. And we do that in an iterative process. That's why we're pivoting through those two circles before we pass that red line into executing and really starting to push sales and getting this into the market. So as we do this customer discovery and validation, we're also doing that development work, but it's based on what customers have actually told us. And That's where those test designs, going from the scribbles on the left to the fine line on the right, that's what we're in the throes of right now with this particular case study. And the nice thing is we have some of those resources that are needed here at TVC to develop that first software product, to go out and then show that to the market, get some feedback, and they'll tell us, hey, I want this red instead of blue. We'll change it and pivot and give them exactly the product that they need through this process. And what we've found is it takes a lot less money and time in the long run, because we're not having to build a full product and then go out and say, oh, we have to change this product and it's a whole rebuild. It's just an iterative process based on that customer persona and their feedback.
And I think what you said, even on the cost saving side of that, how many times do we go down the wrong road, and because we've gone down that road almost too far, are we not able to get back? I've seen a number of clients on my side that we have tried to build a market, and we've gotten into this execution phase, and at the end of the campaign, the learning really is we needed to pivot back previous to completing this entire campaign, and at that point budget has been spent and things have been done. And a lot of that is, for an agency, sometimes we are beholden to what our client really wants versus being able to really say, have we gone through all these processes? And so if they come to us and say, these are the people we want to go after, this is what we want to do, in some cases that's what we have to execute on. And many times we come back to them and say, we may think we've learned something that is very valuable to you, and do you have these processes in place to put the learning in earlier, I guess. And so many times they really don't, and we end up having to build that with them. So I think this is a critical understanding of pivoting prior to actual execution.
And I think it's good for us at TVC to learn from what you guys are doing. We do try and, especially on our team, we try and look out at even large companies that do a lot of research and development, that have huge marketing and sales budgets. We just don't have that. And so if we can learn from whatever documentation they've created or whatever process they've created, it's really valuable for us.
And even us, as we have specific industries that we excel in and have clients, and we just continue to apply that learning to each of the different clients. And often, they're not competing products, but they all work within the same sphere. And so we can say, well, we learned this about these types of computers that this age group is using, and so we need to build a website based on that kind of a computer, where if people are a little bit younger, they might be able to use a little bit more flashy website. If we're using an older demographic, we have to be a little bit more straightforward. And sometimes as you see it, you visualize it as, I want it to look really nice, but what we're building for is the customer and not for your brand or how you feel you want it to be seen. You have to make it usable for those people, and so understanding those groups.
Great comment.
Yeah, one benefit that I'm seeing along those lines is specifically for university researchers and inventors, they will do a lot of work based on research grants from the federal government. And one example that we have worked with over the last year, a couple of researchers had been very successful at getting grants. They had spent about $2 million of grants developing a product, developing some technology that we wanted to see if we could put it into a product. We went through this process with the customer, the discovery and validation, and found that their work over the last few years and $2 million, the market thought was really, really cool, but nobody wanted to buy it. And it just wasn't commercializable. And so the inventors came back to us after going through this process and said, this has been amazing. It has changed the way that I will do my research in the future, because with just a minor tweak 2 or 3 years ago when I was writing some grants or doing this research work, we could have changed the direction of our research just a little bit and come out with a product that the market actually would adopt. And so it's been an interesting mindset change or a paradigm shift for some of the inventors that we've worked with to say, you don't have to change a lot, but if you do talk to customers before you start your work, it can have a really large impact on the product that comes out.
Fantastic. And so I'm going to take over right where you just left off, Taylor. I think that's a great segue into actually visualizing your product. And we're going to talk about just that, of how do you visualize your product, and how do you visualize it from the actual production of it, to the packaging of it, to the delivery of it, to the person that it needs to be put in front of. And so we'll touch a little bit on each of those. First off, everybody knows SWAT. I'm sure those of you listening, this is a little elementary for you, but the importance of it really is there. And so many times have I gone into major corporations and asked for their SWAT, and they don't have it. And so, as elementary as it may seem, this is something that gets skipped more often than you know, because people really believe that they know the market. They've maybe made a few sales. If you ever watch Shark Tank, you get these people in there and they say, well, we've made 100 sales, and they just get devoured by the sharks, being like, that isn't indicative, because they're usually your friends, your family, people that are close to you who are going to give you a helping hand. But when you really get into the marketplace, is that sustainable for you? And that's where a SWOT goes beyond just your own environment and really looks at the larger, more broad industry.
Dustin, when you do this SWOT analysis with your clients, which quadrant do you find that they have the hardest time filling out?
So actually two, and that's the strengths and weaknesses. And in my opinion, it's more strengths than weaknesses, and that's back to because most people really focus on the features of their product, and that's not necessarily a strength. So few people, right now we're talking so much about story, and so many people can't tell us the story of why I use this product. They will tell me the specs of it and how wonderful it is, and just, this is, 10 times faster, it makes you that much more skinny, or makes you this much more beautiful, all these things that it does, and that's because the laser is this. But they're really not talking about how do you feel such that you want to go buy this product. And that, to me, is the strength that they miss the most, and that really is something that people probably are surprised by. Like, strength's probably what they really think they have a handle on, but when you take that to market, and when we start doing conversion rate optimization on landing pages, we see that people are getting to we're driving traffic, we do a really good job of that, but are we converting? And that's really where things start to fall apart. And what that's all about is, did you build trust, and did you build a story that actually affected them emotionally, that they're willing to now hand over money or some type of, tangible asset to take your product? And so many people miss that. The second one being weaknesses, kind of back to like Strengths Finder, if you guys have ever gone through that. People will recognize weaknesses that, in my opinion, can be strengths, and they get really hung up on, we don't even want to go into this space. The other thing that they do is they use weaknesses as things they want to hide, and so they don't recognize their weaknesses, and then they don't actually address their weaknesses. And so in not all cases do you actually have to solve your weakness, but if you properly communicate to people that we recognize that this is a weakness, but this is how our strengths make up for all of that, and this is why it's still worth it, I think that's really important for people to realize, that these things aren't necessarily defined the way that they are. Like, strengths doesn't have to be this power thing for you. It doesn't have to be the product itself. It could be just your story. You think of Tom's. Is their strength really shoe building? I'm sure on their SWOT it absolutely is. I mean, they make shoes. That's a strength. They have the ability to make and distribute shoes, unlike most people. But their strength is really that they have this +1 model, where they're going out and they have people who are more invested in the message and what they're trying to do than they do in the actual shoe. And I see Spencer shaking his head. I don't know.
Well, sometimes it's hard to do in tech transfer at the university, is to tell the story. I think we have a hard time with that.
Looking at the case study that we just did, the technology is really cool. That's where we are right now, is building that technology. We definitely, so in the next steps of this webinar series, I'm hoping that we'll be able to draw out, okay, what is the next step for Soundkeeper, that case study?
Yeah.
Because we need to start telling that story. Hey, and actually Shanna did a great job of that. When she came in and presented, she's an amazing singer. She sang during the presentation, and that was the story. It was, hey, you just listened to this amazing rendition of Ave Maria, and it's lost.
You'll never hear it again.
Yeah, you'll never hear it again.
And you are moved emotionally at that point.
Exactly.
You touched on it. Anything else on this slide, guys? So the next thing is just personas, and this is just an image I took off the web. We do this at Fluid all the time, one of the really big things, and you hear in marketing right now a lot about segmentation, and people are segmenting to title, to age demographic, to income level, a lot of different things, and businesses really should have multiple personas. It's not that to your earlier point, your personas with the medical devices is you got to get the consumer, you got to get the doctor, but you also have to get the investors and the department. Those are all different personas, and so have you actually identified that, and then have you come up with a strategy for your creation of the product that will address all of those different personas? And so at Fluid, we create these. A lot of the way that we do this is, first off, kind of working with the client to understand what their perceived personas are, but then also taking some of the web traffic that comes to their site and layering on third-party data to start to come up with trends. And once we use those trends, we start to bucket people into different groups, and then we try to outline them by actually giving them a name. And the importance of personas and having a name in these short, brief bullets is to give to your marketing department, to give to your customer service department, to give to your sales department so that they sell correctly, that they're talking to them in their own language. What are the pain points that affect one persona versus the other? They're not the same in most cases.
So when you go in and define those personas initially, do you have an idea of who those are initially, or do you just start and say, we'll get there eventually after we talk with people, or do you go in with kind of a hypothesis and say, this is who we think it is? And how do you develop that hypothesis?
So definitely come in with a hypothesis, and it's almost hard not to, because you're coming in with this product and you're like, this is who I'm going to sell it to. And so the way we come up with that hypothesis is just a general understanding of the product. For the most part, you'll understand who is the product made for, what is their age group, who will it benefit, and then who are the other people within the space, and then who are the stakeholders. And so that can usually be established if you just think hard enough about it. But then we always come back and we refine based on traffic to the site, inquiries, customer service responses, things of that nature, where the real persona is actually starting to come, and you'll find that these things group up really nicely after a while, and if you pay attention to them, even after you've launched them, and I think that's the most missed part, is we come in with a hypothesis and we always leave there, because we did this exercise once, it took a lot of time, and we're just moving on. Now we're in fulfillment mode. But really, you need to come back to it and reanalyze it, because so many of my clients we just said, we thought we were in the 18 to 35 demo, but we're actually in the 35 to 54. And, little did we know, but that's actually our most profitable group. And so we actually shift, and maybe the 18 to 34 was still correct, but they weren't the real buyers, and so they buy one time versus the 35 to 54, and that group's really the ones who are purchasing, or maybe they're buying the gift for the 35-year-old, and somehow we misperceived who the actual buyer of it is. And so the real data is what you want to base this off of, but come in with some concept. Focus groups, and love this image. Actually, was just talking with a client earlier today that is up here on campus, and this is an image of, there's many ways to do focus groups. You guys could probably speak to how you do these. With the university, often you can pick large marketing classes even, and come in and do kind of an informal focus group. What's pictured is one of more formal focus groups where you actually get to sit back and peer in as people are thinking. I love this process, and I don't know if you guys watch Silicon Valley, but they were just doing this, and Richard actually ends up walking through the door to explain the product to the people who are so confused. And once he has explained it, they all get it, but he gets so frustrated. But it just really showed that disconnect between what he thought he had produced and what the people were really seeing. And so focus groups, as silly as they may be, are highly effective, and they can give you that feedback that your family and friends don't really want to give you. And even sometimes if you have a paid consultant, they might tread a little lightly on giving you this, but just somebody off the street, they're pretty forthcoming, and they'll tell you what's up. And so these can be really fun, and there's many ways to do them. We can assist with that. I don't know, what are your guys' experience with this?
Well, We've done it in the past, but and it helped. It was basically a product that was a talking pill bottle, and so we were able to get a lot of people who we thought were the demographic come in and use it, and we had the same exact experience of, how do you not understand this? And so I wanted to ask you, what are the biggest or best ways that people can avoid that, having that situation? How do you do that in terms of developing the product such that it is more self-explanatory or more usable for the customer?
In my opinion, it is bringing somebody from the outside in.
And do that early, or when do you want to do that?
Very early on. I think, at least for me, I think that if you get too far, again, it's investment wasted. If you have your product mostly developed and you haven't brought that person in, that person could tell you the exact opposite, and then you're back to square one. And how much money have you dumped into going to, square 10 when, you didn't actually do it correctly in the beginning? And so I think it's from the very beginning you start with focus groups. I think you start with focus groups at the name, at the function of it. Do you care? And then you do stages of focus groups of, okay, we have the product, we're pretty spot on. Now we want to see if it actually, the look and feel, with the talking bottle, did it work? Do you push a button? Is that button, we use heuristics in the way you use mobile web. I'm not sure what the term would be, but, was it easy to use with your thumb, or was it, too small, too big, things like that. And so I think there's stages of focus groups, to be quite honest. And then, so there's also options, and this is kind of bringing people in, and I say consulting, and I don't want everybody out there to think this is all paid consulting. You can do family and friends, you can reach out to universities, there are small business associations, there's obviously the TVC, there's a lot of different resources that aren't necessarily paid for, but I think you should look at it as some of the different types of consulting that you have. And so the first is business operations, and so with a lot of what you guys are doing, maybe you have, I'm thinking of the example with Mike, is he here to build a huge business? Or does he just want to have his product and reach out to a few different universities, but he doesn't really want to deal with the finances of it? And so there are companies like Advanced CFO. You can outsource your CFO, and they'll do all of your books and give you advice, and you don't have to do any of that work, and you can focus on your core competencies. LegalZoom, obviously a cheap legal way to go, and maybe that's part of getting set up. I think the TVC would have better resources, but my example here is just that even in the beginning you can get some advice to figure out if this is a feasible concept.
And I think it's important to have this conversation even this early as, this webinar we're talking about concept of product. It's a valid question. How far do you want to take this? Because if as an inventor or as an entrepreneur, if you're not committed to the idea, then why even get started? Why even explore concept of product if you're not going to be serious about about these other services that you're going to need?
Absolutely. And even contrary, can you outsource them? You have your role that you are passionate about and still make it be success. Other ones like Mercado Partners, they're people who would get investment, and this really is this early on, like, will I be able to get an investor for such an idea? Is there even a space? And these guys, without having to invest anything, can at least tell you, yeah, we know there are groups that are looking for products of this nature, or, we really haven't heard that, or we have heard that and it didn't really pan out in the end for these reasons, and back to, do you even want to get started with this? So that's some of the business side of things. And the next is business systems consulting. Are you going to have a CRM? Are you going to have a phone system? Are you going to have a website, social media? Are these things necessary for what you do? In the case study example with Mike, I don't know that he really needs all that. Where maybe he's going to universities directly, is that something he has to launch with right at the beginning? Is that going to hurt him? Maybe, maybe not. Where it's so personal relationships, they would rather have somebody just show up and sing to them and really understand how this could affect him. I was looking at that slide, I saw that $100,000 savings, am I right? Mm-hmm. To the university. That's a number that might let me
per year
in the door.
Per year.
Yeah, annually. So I think that there are people who can come in and say, you need a phone system right away. Or if you even do buy business systems, if you don't really know how to use them, are you getting your money's worth? And so oftentimes I've noticed people buy systems before they're ready, and then they're paying fees that they're just paying, and they're not actually utilizing the service. And so there are people who can help advise on that as well. And then industry expertise. You know, obviously the TVC is expert with entrepreneurs, inventors in this university space and throughout. They are a great group, and you know, what's the investment for them? What kind of industries or verticals can they help you with? And so there's a lot of different industry expertise across verticals that you can rely on, and in the TVC case, you can come to them at no price, correct, at no initial investment, just to have a conversation and learn if your partnership would be proper. I don't know if you guys have something to say.
I think a lot of our time is spent just in the talking and the discussing and helping the inventor kind of just to think outside their use case, think outside their lab. And yeah, I mean, a lot of what we do is considered consulting.
Yeah, and I think the benefit so that's the benefit, I think, internally to the university. The benefit of companies that are interested in growing their business is a similar discussion. I mean, they don't know what the cutting edge resource or research is in their industry unless they come into the university or other places where that's being done and look. And so, I mean, we have 1,500 patents at any given time that are on our shelves that we're looking for a home for. And so that consultative, hey, we have these concepts that are moving towards products and they need a home. They need a company or a business that says, we're looking for a new product line in our space. How can we use our market expertise to guide the development of some new inventions that have come out of the university, and in turn take that into the company and launch that as a new product line? That's I think where that consultative work happens both on the inside of the university and on the outside.
And then my last slide, I'll have you guys speak to this as well, but we've given you a lot of ideas. This is how you should do it. I also want to be mindful that you are an inventor, you are the entrepreneur, and sometimes a gut feeling is the correct feeling, even though you can go on and do all this research and be told who your persona is. You can also create personas and create demand. And so if you go on research and everybody's saying negative things, that shouldn't be just right then and there that you quit on it. You know, we've kind of been trained to, oh, is this going to work, and have people validate us. But a lot of what inventors are and entrepreneurs are is, this is my gut, and I'm willing to put the blood, sweat, and tears into this, and I'm going to create this to work. And so even though I've talked about consultation and listening to people, never lose the true gut feeling that you have as well.
I wouldn't add anything to that. That was a great summation.
So we'll wrap up really quickly, and so just in summary, I think we're looking at in the concept to product phase, does anybody care? Is there a market at all? And how do we do that? We just start talking to customers, identify your gaps. People like TVC can really show you where these gaps are and help you ask those additional questions that you may not be thinking of, so that you do make sure you address them early on. Create a blueprint. Mapping out a business is so overlooked but so necessary, and really spending time in this phase is so critical. Do you guys see, you know, people kind of rush, even if they do have a blueprint, maybe they want to just get a product out early or anything to that effect, where they just, I don't know, I feel like sometimes blueprints are done but maybe not completely done sometimes.
Definitely. I mean, oftentimes there's a blueprint in place, but it hasn't had the viewpoint put into it from the market. I mean, it's been a very individualized blueprint and built by one person, and that's where I think the focus of this stage, the concept of product, it's so important to do what Spencer was talking about. Do that initial search. See if there's something out there. I mean, take some time to do that. It doesn't take a lot, but then take the next step and say, okay, are there customers out there? So don't spend all the time just building, but also looking into what the market wants. I would say that's one of the larger takeaways I would hope from this section of our series.
And one more plug there. I mentioned the Google search, but search Facebook, search LinkedIn. You know, if there's a certain subject or technology or title that you've identified, LinkedIn can be really helpful actually to find some of the opinion and thought leaders and subject matter experts.
The nice thing about being here at the university is we have a lot of resources in that area. For some reason, these research tools love to give academic licenses to the university, and so our student analysts have access to tens of thousands of dollars worth of databases that can be utilized to do that work. And so we've got some amazing resources here that can help in that.
And then just to finalize the summary here, just visualize more than just your product. You know, you have this thing, this is how it will work, but this is my business too, how will it work? These are the people I'm going after, who are they? Make sure that you visualize a lot more than just the product and its package. And then lastly, again, we believe in you guys. That's why we're here, and we're here to support you. And the entrepreneurial spirit that you have is really what we are trying to nurture. And so never give up on that, and ask more questions, if anything. Don't just let your idea go because, you know, maybe somebody in passing told you it was a bad idea. So we're actually going to now switch over for all those that are able to. If you want to go to Fluid's Facebook page, we are going to be doing our questions live. So give us just a couple of seconds here, and we will get that up and going, and then we'll go ahead and launch that. We will remain live on this as well, so if you can't make it to the Facebook, you can continue to listen to the questions via the webinar.
I'd encourage all of you to, if you've got some questions and you're not on the audio or anything like that, type them in. We're happy to have a discussion around any of the questions that you have, or if we said anything that sparks some ideas, we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, so I believe we are live on Facebook now for any of you following us. And then just for everybody currently on Facebook, my name is Dustin Cederholm. I'm with Fluid Advertising. I'm here at the University of Utah with the Technology and Venture Commercialization Group. I have Spencer and Taylor here. And we just wanted to quickly do a Q&A about our part 2 in our 4-part series. This is concept to production with products. And so we're going to go ahead and answer a few questions from our previous webinar, which you guys can find on our website, getfluid.com. And we'll share that with any registrants as well. So just quickly, the first question we had was, what type of resources do you have for getting a prototype of a product? I have a great idea, but I don't have the skills to engineer it. How does this work?
So the benefit of being at a university is there are a lot of departments on campus, and they have a lot of resources. They've spent a lot of money on capital equipment, if you will. So there's one group on campus called CEI, the Center of Engineering Innovation, and they have basically, you're able to open the doors to all of the different tools that they have for building anything that's physical, anything like that, 3D printers, machine tools, etc. And so there's a method through CEI and their website that you can go look at that. Software development-wise, Spencer manages that side of our office, and then the CMI, Center for Medical Innovation, is kind of the upper campus, more health science related, and they do a lot of that work as well. So a lot of those resources can be found on our website. Are there others that I'm missing?
No, I think you did a good job of explaining the ones that are here. We also, we partner with lots of firms in the Valley that can do prototyping, and so that's one of the benefits of our database that we've created over the last year and a half. Is we can go in and look at the technology, we can look at the type of what service provider they are, and make a match there. So that's a simple thing for us.
Wow. To me, actually, in my own personal life, seems so complex, and you just made it sound so simple. Do you have to have, kind of an extension of that, do you have to do the blueprint, or is that part of what these services offer? Do you have to come with all your specs and then they build the prototype, or are they able to do it from scratch with in my head, this is what I want to see?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you are. So if you're coming from outside of the university, you're not a professor, you're not faculty or staff, It's easier if you have that blueprint, if you've done some of this work ahead of time, because what you'll have to do is find kind of a sponsoring professor here at the university that's in the space that you're looking to work in, and work with that professor. We can go into more details about that, but if you're coming from outside the university, you kind of have to figure out who your partner or your sponsor is within the university that will work with you to go through that process. They can help you develop that blueprint, but it's nice to have something to work from. If you're a university inventor, it's a little bit different. That's what our whole office is here for, is to serve those university inventors. And that's where we can help go through what we described in our commercialization engine of figuring out what to do to build that blueprint.
Oh, awesome. Next question is just, what type of investment is needed to engage with a consultant, whether that is TVC or one of the others that were mentioned in the webinar? How about you guys start with TVC?
Investment needed to engage. It really varies. We have, you get what you pay for, I guess, is kind of what's said sometimes, and so it's not always best to go after what's free. And so we have some very qualified, but not always inexpensive people that we can partner with. As far as investment, we have funds internally at TVC that we can use to help advance the technology, and it really just depends. We see asks that come. I mean, it's a wide range. Someone might ask for 500, and someone might ask for 5,000
and 50,000
and up. Yeah, it really depends. Every scenario is different.
So these resources that we have internally, again, they're focused for projects that are coming from the university. As people from the outside look in at the university and say, how can I tap into that? That goes back to what I was saying. You'd have to be kind of what we call commercial sponsored research. You'd have to do that with a professor and say, okay, I need something built, and the expertise is at the university. Our office will help guide that process of putting an agreement in place and figuring out what that relationship between the university and the outside group look like. And to Spencer's point, the investment varies. I mean, if you're looking for very early stage, are we going to just maybe even spend some time? That's probably the lowest level to, okay, how do we do a collaboration? I mean, we've had large companies come in and put millions of dollars into developing a product or developing a technology with the university.
Excellent. And, to answer the side on maybe some of the third-party things, a lot of them, it's kind of like the world of legal. The phone call is free, but the sit-down might not always be. But we're more than happy to at least accept the phone call and guide you in the right direction. Most of the time, at least from a fluid standpoint, there's no charge for that. But if you do want to engage at a further level, there's obviously some give and take to that. But the investment can be minimal to really extreme, depending on what you're trying to do.
And sometimes the answer to the question of can you help me, or what should I do next, is spend some more time on your own. Or it might be, and we're not afraid to say this, we're not the right partner, for what you need right now. Maybe, but we try and then have a good handoff. I mean, I assume that if someone comes to Fluid and it's just not the match, rather than be everything to everyone, it's it's not the right fit for us.
We absolutely have other marketing companies that we will shift you to and say, these are the guys who will do the best. I mean, we are a growth acceleration company, and that's what we want to see you do. And I think just like you guys and anybody else, you don't want to take on projects you're going to be a failure at. And so we will analyze it, and then we'll direct you. And that research alone can be really valuable to get into the right hands. And are you looking in the wrong space? And so that could be, a consultative service that really helps you just even start looking at this stuff.
Now, having said that, I mean, if you go to the TVC's website and you know anything that you see there as far as services that we offer, yeah, we are experts in a lot of things, and the mission that we and the services we provide to the university, we can deliver on all of those. I guess the other services I was talking about would be some that maybe Fluid would offer. We do some marketing, we can get them to a certain point, then there needs to be a handoff to professionals.
Absolutely, sure. Our next question, how do you know if your concept is ready for production? It's a little bit broad, but maybe let you guys start that off. That's on.
In our experience, I would push that back onto the market and say, okay, within our process, we've nailed it down to the point where in our conversations with customers, they will give us the specifications that they require. And when we can hit those specifications and do it in a scalable way, or at least the potential of scaling, that's when we understand that it's ready to launch. So an example, we've been building a prototype over the last year and a half. We did a quarter scale prototype first, tested that in the market, just got some feedback. They said yes, but change these things. We've gotten it now to a full scale prototype. We're doing another set of tests with the customers and saying, is this working for you? As soon as it meets that threshold where they say, yes, we're ready to do it, then we can say, okay, it's time to do a full launch. On the software side, it may be a bit different.
Yeah, and the thought I had was, as consumers, we go to a store and we just see the finished goods. And sometimes there's a disconnect or a lack of appreciation for all of the work that leads up to getting something on the shelf. I mean, years and years in some cases. Now with software, I think the fun part about software is that it doesn't take years and years in a lot of cases. I mean, you can build something and put it out there, and it's so easy to test online. But even with physical goods, it's easy to test online now. I mean, you guys probably have experience with this where you can put something out there. Let's see how much traffic goes to that. Let's see where they spend time on the site, and then let's just shift, maybe the focus of what we are creating to those features.
That's fantastic, and I think when you say that, just like medicine, how long in testing in that phase before it ever gets to hit the market, and
Sure.
just how much goes into that. So when do they know when it's ready? I guess when the or FAC or whatever it is that actually says you are allowed. Yeah. So I think that question we may, for all of you out there, we apologize. I think it's a little bit vague and it's kind of hard, but I think testing is kind of the overall.
Let the market tell you.
Yeah, agreed. Our next question is just what methods do you have to do research for keywords or other market research? And Taylor actually kind of posed this question to me as well. And so for those of you out there who are curious, how can I see what the market could bear from maybe a search standpoint, or how many sales are actually being generated through e-commerce or whatever it might be. But first off, start with the free tools, and that's going to be Google Keyword Planner. There's another, if you actually just type in Keyword Planner into your search result, you will get Google Keyword Planner, but you also get a number of other free ones such as like Moz or Spy Foo, Screaming Frog. So those are a few that you can utilize, and all they do is they rank keywords.
You can say those with a straight face.
I don't know if I did, but
impressive.
They're highly functional tools, and
in spite of their name.
Yes. But Google Keyword Planner is really where I would initially start, especially as Spencer was talking about. Get those 10 keywords or so that you're going to start with, and Google can do two things. First off, it can give you keyword ideas. So if you have something close, you can kind of plug in either the keyword themselves, or you could plug in a URL of a website that has a similar product, and it will spit back some of the keywords that it ranks for or make it relevant. And so the keyword idea tool is one, and then the other is the keyword frequency tool, which is just going to show you how many actual searches are happening for that keyword, and then how competitive are they. So there might be some keywords, and that's kind of when we were talking, is this a viable idea, and going in those search terms, and if there's not, multiple millions of searches or returned results for that, you can actually see with a competitive ranking of how hard would it be to actually engage with a new product into this market. And if it's, a score of 10, you know that there's a lot of people investing in this keyword and there's a lot of money behind it. And so just a low level, investment into that probably is not going to merit a lot of return. And so that's a great tool.
Can I ask you a question on that, just as a case study? So, when we get a new invention disclosure in, we'll often get a description of the technology or the concept. If I have a paragraph written about what the product or the technology is, which of those tools would you suggest to use to draw out the keywords that I should search for from that paragraph?
So you're going to have to manually kind of do some of that. You couldn't just drop a block of text and have it analyze it necessarily. I would almost just use Google for what you just said, and I would maybe drop that whole paragraph into a search bar of Google and see what it returns.
Awesome.
Okay. But yeah, so we could definitely do just that search, and it'll pull up the site, because Google's going to use its major algorithm to figure out, what is this paragraph about, and it's going to return the most relevant searches. And it may not be the first one, but you could probably dive in and you probably see like this is something about it, or somebody wrote something similar at some point.
Interesting. Very cool.
Yeah. So I think that's our time today. If you have any other questions, please feel free to post them to any of our social media platforms. We will get you answers as well. And then remember that we will be on again in another month or so. And so the series continues with part 3. And we will be sending the recording of this and invitations for the next presentation in the next week or so. Thank you all for joining us again. On behalf of everybody here from the TVC and Fluid, have a great day, and we will talk soon.